Okay, picture this. You wake up one morning and you make one tiny, incredibly basic lifestyle change, a choice literally millions of people make every single day. But instead of just moving on with your life, this one tiny choice causes your marriage, your family, and your actual grip on reality to spectacularly self-destruct. Hey guys, welcome to this explainer of Han Kang's absolutely mind-bending novel, The Vegetarian. We are going through a story today that escalates so wildly fast, you are literally going to be watching this with your hand over your mouth.
Seriously, I want you to keep this question in the back of your mind as we go. What if a simple diet change caused your entire life to violently self-destruct? Because, well, that is exactly what happens to our main character, Yeong-hye. She's just a totally regular housewife who makes a completely normal decision to stop eating meat. But she lives in this fiercely controlling world, and this one single act of defiance, it pushes absolutely everyone around her and ultimately her own mind completely past the breaking point. And just look at this artwork, the eerie, terrifying, and dark descent into madness. It captures the vibe perfectly. Because honestly, going through this story feels way less like reading a book and more like watching a terrifying psychological train wreck in slow motion. It is a dark descent into total madness, and the craziest part? It all starts with a dream. Actually, scratch that. It's an absolute nightmare, filled with blood, crushed bones, and screaming faces.
To figure out why things go so incredibly wrong, we really have to look at this dynamic. On the left, we've got Yeong-hye. She is silent, she's struggling, and she's genuinely traumatized by these super vivid nightmares of slaughter and blood. And on the right, her husband. And guys, let me tell you, this guy is the absolute worst. From the very first page, he literally brags about how he only married her because she was, quote, completely unremarkable and wouldn't challenge him. He is obsessed with society thinking he's normal. So when his wife wakes up from this horrifying nightmare and throws out every single piece of meat in their house, does he comfort her?
Nope, absolutely not. He says, what the hell? So all because of some ridiculous dream, you've gone and chucked out all the meat? Worth how much? I mean, seriously, the man opens the fridge, sees it's empty, and his only thought is about his lunch and his grocery money. He actually complains that she won't even fry him an egg. His wife is clearly having a massive psychological crisis, and he is just mad he has to go to work without his usual breakfast. But if you think he's bad behind closed doors, oh man, just wait until he takes her out in public.
Because now we have the dinner party from hell. Every story has that one scene that just gives you terminal secondhand embarrassment, right? Well, this is it. The husband wants to impress his boss, so he drags Yeong-hye to the super fancy, high-stakes dinner with all the company executives. And remember, he hasn't supported her at all up until this point. He just expects her to shut up and act normal. But Yeong-hye, she is entirely done playing along.
Here is the ultimate social sabotage. First, she shows up wearing a slightly clinging blouse with absolutely no bra, which immediately sends her husband into a total panic. Then, the waiter serves this exquisite, super expensive meat jelly, and Yeong-hye just quietly refuses to eat it. The whole table just stops. Her husband's coworkers actually start openly mocking her vegetarianism right to her face. They're asking if she thinks she's better than them, making weird jokes about chomping live octopuses to death. And how does Yeong-hye react? She doesn't apologize, she doesn't make excuses. She just blankly stares down the boss's wife in dead silence. It is incredibly awkward, and the husband is, of course, absolutely humiliated.
Wait, what? So you'd think after a disaster like that, they might actually sit down and talk about what's going on, right? No way. Instead of talking to his wife, the husband decides to pull the ultimate betrayal. He secretly calls up Yeong-hye's parents and tattles on her like a child. He literally tells them she's stopped eating meat and is ruining his life. And this leads to the most disastrous, chaotic family intervention you could possibly imagine.
Her whole family just shows up at her house, carrying tons of meat dishes. They completely gang up on her, screaming that she looks terrible and needs to knock it off. And then it gets physical. Her dad is this notoriously hot-tempered guy, and he yells, "Eat it quickly, my arm hurts. Don't you understand what your father's telling you? If he tells you to eat, you eat." He literally grabs her, forces her mouth open, while her mom tries to shove sweet and sour pork down her throat. Her brother is even holding her arms down. It's this violently terrifying violation of her boundaries, right at the dinner table, and her husband is just standing there watching the whole thing.
And this is the exact moment the tension finally snaps. She grabs a fruit knife, Yeong-hye howls like an absolute animal, spits the meat out, grabs a knife off the table, and slices her own wrist, right in front of everybody. This is a massive mid-story plot twist that grabs a story, rips it out of quirky family drama territory, and throws it straight into dark psychological horror. She's immediately rushed to the hospital, bleeding out. Let's look at the rapid escalation here, because things get wildly out of control so fast. Day 1, she suddenly stops eating meat. A few weeks later, she completely stops sleeping because the nightmares are so bad. Then comes the intervention, where she slits her wrist, but it definitely doesn't stop there. In the hospital, her mind fully fractures. She wanders the hospital ward completely topless, totally oblivious to the world. And that brings us to the climax, where she tries to become a plant. Yeong-hye doesn't just want to be a vegetarian anymore.
Yeah, she wants to be a tree. You read that right. She literally tries to become a plant. Her detachment from humanity becomes absolute. She stops talking, she stops wearing clothes, and she completely refuses to eat anything at all, not even vegetables. She fully believes that human violence is tied to eating and moving, and the only way to be pure is to just shed her human form entirely.
There's this quote she says in the psychiatric hospital, and it is honestly haunting. "Look, sister, I'm doing a handstand. Leaves are growing out of my body. Roots are sprouting out of my hands. I wanted flowers to bloom from my crotch." She starts literally doing handstands in her hospital room, spreading her legs, genuinely believing she's soaking up sunlight and photosynthesizing. And because she's eating absolutely nothing, her weight plummets to under 30 kilos. That's like 65 pounds. She is literally starving to death right in front of them.
Now, you might be wondering, where is the husband during all this? Oh, he divorces her and vanishes. Surprise, surprise. This shifts the story to the sister's heavy burden. In-hye, her older sister, is the only person left in the whole world who actually cares about Yeong-hye. Their parents totally washed their hands of the situation, so In-hye is left completely alone to deal with this terrifying, surreal hospital stay.
In-hye is pushed to her absolute limit. She's running a business, raising a son as a single mom, and desperately trying to save a sister who actively wants to die so she can become a tree. She tries to shake Yeong-hye back to reality, begging her, "You're dying. You're lying there in that bed and dying. Nothing else." But Yeong-hye just stares back with these empty black pupils. And then the doctors warn In-hye that if Yeong-hye doesn't eat immediately, her organs are going to fail.
Which brings us to the most intense climax of the entire explainer. Wait, what? Yep, it gets even more insane. The doctors pull In-hye aside and say they're completely out of options. They're going to force-feed Yeong-hye. They literally strap her to the bed, bring out this thick medical tube, and plan to just shove it down her throat to pump food straight into her stomach. What happens next is straight-up nightmare fuel. In-hye screams, "Take it out, take the tube out quickly. Stop it, don't, please don't." Yeong-hye is thrashing around, violently resisting. And In-hye, seeing this horrific mirror image of what their dad did at the dinner party, completely loses it. When the doctors won't stop, In-hye literally lunges at the nurses. She actually bites the arm of the nurse holding the tranquilizer. It is just total desperate chaos in that hospital room.
But it's too late. The tube causes severe damage, and blood starts gushing out of Yeong-hye's mouth. The text describes it as splashing all over the doctor's white gown like a whirling galaxy of bloody stars. In-hye grabs her convulsing, bleeding sister, just holding her tight. The doctors realize they've caused massive internal bleeding, and they have to immediately throw Yeong-hye into an ambulance to rush her to a bigger hospital in Seoul, just to keep her alive.
Which brings us to waking up from the nightmare. This final, chilling sequence in the ambulance. It's pouring rain outside. In-hye is sitting in the back, her clothes literally soaked in her sister's blood. And as she stares at Yeong-hye, who's drifting in and out of consciousness, In-hye starts to have a complete psychological breakdown of her own. She starts questioning her own sanity, her entire reality. And here is the incredibly dark truth of the whole story. In-hye leans in and whispers this to her sister. Perhaps this is all a kind of dream. Surely the dream isn't all there is. We have to wake up at some point, don't we? In-hye realizes that her own life, playing the perfect wife, the perfect daughter, suffering through this toxic, abusive family just to seem normal, is actually the real nightmare. She confesses she's barely holding on herself. If Yeong-hye hadn't snapped first, In-hye probably would have.
Was Yeong-hye the only sane one? Think about it. This is the most shocking takeaway. In a world where your husband controls what you wear, your parents physically force-feed you, and doctors strap you down to pump you full of food against your will, was going crazy the only sane choice? By completely losing her mind and trying to become a tree, she found literally the only way to get her bodily autonomy back. She flat out refused to participate in their violent, controlling world for one more second. So if society demands you act normal in a toxic world, is going crazy the only real way to escape? What would you do? Seriously, I want to know what you guys think about this insane ending. If you were in Yeong-hye's shoes, or even in Hae's, what would your breaking point be? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get a huge discussion going. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this explainer of the vegetarian, and I'll catch you in the next one.